On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, I get overdramatic as I talk about the Crystal Ball release of 1985's Sexual Suicide. So this is where things start to get a little weird with my podcast, and I'm not talking about the lyrics of the song, which aren't weird at all, despite what maybe the title might indicate. Since my podcast is mostly done chronologically, I've deviated a bit when I chose to cover all of the tracks released on 2019's originals, some from the era that I'm currently in this 83, 84, 85 era, but some of the songs on that project came and were written before that era, some were written after. So I deviated a little bit from the chronology aspect of my podcast by covering originals. Nonetheless, I'm back on the chronology train, which means I'll be covering some songs that eventually got an official release from Prince on an album without him re-recording them. For example, Raven to the Joy Fantastic and Can't Stop This Feeling I Got, those songs predate their officially re-recorded released versions, but I'm going to want to cover those when I get to those official albums. Like, I'll want to cover Raven to the Joy Fantastic when I get to the album Raven to the Joy Fantastic, and I'm going to cover Can't Stop This Feeling I Got when I get to Graffiti Bridge, even though it was the original version was released on the 1999 Super Deluxe a while back. But a song like Sexual Suicide, for example, was recorded in the summer of 1985. It was not re-recorded, but it ultimately was released officially on the Crystal Ball project, which came out in either 97 or 98, depending on when you were able to gain access to it. So this is where things get weird, like I said. So when a project like Crystal Ball, which is just a collection of older tracks, and I guess you could even say something similar about the Vault Old Friends for Sale album. I covered Old Friends for Sale already because of the 85 version, even though it was re-recorded for the Vault Old Friends for Sale project, so the lyrics are too different. I don't know, I'm getting off on a tangent. I have a lot of justifications for why I'm doing the things that I'm doing on this show and why I'm covering things in one way and not the other. They all make sense in my head. Hopefully, you guys can just roll with it and manage through my quirks and my idiosyncrasies. So, Sexual Suicide was tracked as early as August of 85 at the Washington Avenue Warehouse Studio in Edina, Minnesota. It was further mixed at Sunset Sound Studios in late September of 1985, and more mixing and additional instruments such as Eric Leeds' saxophone were added throughout late 85 into early 86, as it was seemingly destined for some of the projects Prince was working on at the time, whether it's going to be, that album that they ultimately is being called Dream Factory, or that project, or whatever that is. Or something else, I don't know. But he worked on it for, off and on from August of 85 to, January, February of 86. So it wasn't just a fleeting idea. It was something that I think he wanted to put out there. And ultimately he did. It just took, 13, 14 years to do so. Even though this song did officially get released on Crystal Ball in the late 90s, Prince never played the song live, and so it was never one of those songs where people might have heard it in a live setting and were like, well, when are we gonna get this song? So it kind of was either bootlegged or you had no idea that it was in existence until it finally came out. One of the cool things about the Crystal Ball project is that there are liner notes, many of them very short and sweet, but they do provide some insight, and we have to assume Prince either dictated or wrote all of these liner notes himself. So what does he say about sexual suicide in the liner notes to Crystal Ball? All right, he says, after Sheila E. showed Prince this drum beat, he snatched the sticks and pushed record in his warehouse recording studio, the same joint where Girls and Boys was recorded. In that same week, Supercalifragisexy was cut as well. Either Wendy or Susanna are on background vocals. Eric leads on all horns. We're here, where are you? So just a little bit of insight, and I do like the mention of Girls and Boys in the liner notes because both of these songs contain that odd duck sound, which you kind of either love it or hate it, or in my case, enjoy it for a while, but it gets a little on my nerves. I think that duck sound is one of the reasons why I never was as high on Girls and Boys as some people are. And I like this song as well, but yeah, I don't know. I'm glad it was kind of a fleeting sound that he used. He didn't incorporate that into too many songs because I just don't think, for me personally, it works that well. I'm not a big fan of it, but it doesn't detract me from liking Girls and Boys and Sexual Suicide. It just prevents me from maybe loving those songs instead. So Sexual Suicide seems to be about a relationship on the brink of a collapse. So in the first verse he says, baby, if you take a walk and leave me behind. Baby, you gonna walk? Yeah, gonna walk right out of your mind. We were meant to be, we got no reason to lie. Baby, if you take a walk, people gonna talk. Sexual Suicide. So she's apparently given the narrator of this song, in this case Prince, an indication that she's contemplating leaving him. I think that's what we have to assume, is that she's mentioned it or he senses it or something. I don't know. He doesn't really explicitly say why he feels this way or why he thinks that she's thinking about walking. But, you know, if you take a walk in the context of the song doesn't mean taking a stroll around the lake. Like, I believe it means, you know, leaving him. So he's a little concerned about that. He believes they were meant to be, and leaving him would be sexual suicide. So that phrase is interesting. You know, just if I break it down for myself, suicide, of course, is the act of ending one's own life. So by putting the adjective sexual in front of that word, suicide, it seems to imply that the woman is ending her sex life. So it's the end of something, and doing it to yourself. Nobody's forcing her to leave. Nobody's forcing her to end this relationship. He thinks that they're meant to be. He thinks that, you know, they have a potential. And of course, Prince being Prince, he also thinks that this is probably the best sex you're going to ever have. So if you leave me, I don't know what to tell you, but you're committing sexual suicide. You're never going to be able to find someone that can live up to the expectations that I've established for you from a relationship and pleasure standpoint combined. That's kind of what I get from the term sexual suicide and how it's used in this song. But I'm definitely open if anybody else has alternate theories of what sexual suicide means. In the second verse, baby, if you only knew all the love that's deep in my heart. Oh, baby, me and you wouldn't be nothing that could tear us apart. Honey, every night, cool surrender, lost in my arms. You feel so right. Doing it in the cut, sound your alarm. Baby, can we take a walk? People gonna talk. Sexual suicide. It's a little bit of a longer verse here. He communicates his desires to be closer to this woman. In this verse, he wants her to know what's really going on in his heart, how he feels, and that they, for some reason, aren't communicating in a deeper way yet, and maybe that's what's preventing them from taking the relationship to the next level. The phrase "doing it in the cut" is kind of maybe a bit of a old school phrase. I believe it means something along the lines of having, you know, in this case, doing it in the cut, having sex privately or discreetly. But yeah, this verse just is more of Prince talking about how, he feels like this is the real deal, and he doesn't think anything could tear him apart, and he wishes that she could understand where he's coming from. If you only knew all the love that's deep in my heart. And then he talks a little bit later in the verse about how, when they're together, when they're having sex, when they're doing it in the cut, it feels so right. And Baby Can We Take a Walk is a bit of a interesting way of changing up the words. And he says, baby, if you take a walk, meaning in the first verse, if you leave me, baby, can we take a walk? I think he actually means take a walk. Like, let's go for a walk, let's talk. Let's find a way to connect. Why he's so concerned about what people think is another interesting aspect to these lyrics. People gonna talk. He says right before he says sexual suicide. And so maybe that's his way of saying, our relationship, while still establishing what that means, emotionally, and what it means to us emotionally. Physically, we seem to be connecting, and people sense that. Maybe they see them cuddling or, expressing PDA, and, their various friends who they've maybe confided in are going to wonder what happened. He seems to think that this relationship is of public interest. People are going to talk. They're going to talk about how you're committing sexual suicide by leaving him. That's my takeaway. People are maybe whispering behind their backs, talking about, she'd be a fool for leaving him. He seems to have it going on. Or maybe he's just self-conscious about people talking about their relationship behind his back, behind their backs. I don't know. It's an interesting way to kind of discuss a relationship in a song, is what the perspective is from a third party, outsiders. There's a bridge after the second verse. Ain't nobody like my body, baby. Ain't no ride like my ride. Super skinny minded, baby. If you try to leave me, baby, sexual suicide. So he's kind of feeling himself here. No body like my body. And then in the no ride like my ride, that could be a car, or it could be obviously a euphemism for the way he has sex. To go for a ride can be one of two things depending on the context, and here it can be both. Ain't no ride like my ride. I mean, very clearly to me that it's meant to have that double meaning. I don't really understand super skinny minded babies. I'm not even going to really touch on that because I don't quite know what he means by that phrase. But yeah, if you try to leave me, sexual suicide. He's very, very confident in himself, and he believes that she would be committing sexual suicide by leaving him. And that's essentially what this song is conveying. Here's all the reasons why I think they were good. Here's all the reasons why I think you should stay with me. But it's ultimately your choice. You'll be committing sexual suicide if you decide to leave, and people will talk about that, and they'll probably call you an idiot. And I'm kind of projecting that there's nothing in here that indicates people are going to call her an idiot for leaving him, but that's a little bit of what I'm getting from this song, especially in a bridge like this, when he's talking about how great he is and how good looking he is and how good he is in bed. What would cause people to talk about that? Well, people would talk about how maybe a missed opportunity on her behalf. It's a shame, sugar. Ain't it a shame that you won't play the game? You got too much pride. Sugar, you made your bed, but you gotta sleep with a sexual suicide. And he repeats that, sexual suicide. Girl, if you take a walk, people gonna talk. So in verse 3, he seems a bit more resigned to that her decision may be final. You know, ain't it a shame you won't play the game? You got too much pride. You made your bed. So if you take a walk, people are going to talk. So I do believe in this verse he feels like she is definitely going to leave him. There's absolutely no indication as to why in the song. There's no reflection on the relationship beyond just, here's where it is in this moment. We have great sex. We seem to connect. She's going to leave me. I think it's dumb. I think it's a bad idea. And he seems to be sort of scolding her, telling her she's going to miss out on a good thing if she leaves, which, again, I think is mostly the theme of the song. I got it going on. We connect. You're making a big mistake if you leave me. If I had to summarize this song in just a few sentences, that's maybe how I would do it. But yeah, that's Sexual Suicide. I think, just another song where Prince really talks himself up a bit. But I don't think it's really done in an obnoxious way. I don't think it's done in a cringeworthy or eye-rolling way. It's fairly subtle. I mean, not really if you break down the lyrics, but he doesn't use a lot of exaggerated language. It's more like the term sexual suicide isn't one, I think, that you know exactly what it means without the context of the lyrics behind it. You can use the two words, the meaning of the two words, and kind of come up with your own idea of what the song means based off the title alone, and you would probably be right. But I just think this is done in this song a bit more subtly than some of his other songs where he goes all in on his sexual prowess. And this song takes a different approach where it's not about explicitly stating how skillful he is. It's more about how you have to come to that conclusion through the lyrics and the understanding of what the title of the song means. So not as egregious as some of those other songs, which are oftentimes ballads anyway. So he has a little bit of a variety when he's doing these types of tracks. I don't know exactly why this song never got released, but let's dig into a bit of the Parade and Sign of the Times era studio sessions and see what is said about Sexual Suicide here. There's a quote from Prince. Sexual Suicide has this horn section that is nothing but baritone saxes. It sounds like a truck coming at you. Okay. The journey from concept to completion is unique to each composition. The seed of the song may exist as a joke or an idea and be blown up into full song, but the final result sometimes has little bearing on the original thought. Sexual Suicide is one of those songs that began as a simple piano demo, but the song Prince could hear in his head was much heavier. By the time Prince had finished recording the basic tracks, it was still fairly sparse and needed horns, so once again he called in Eric Leeds. It was one of those first times where he asked me to just come in on my own. He wasn't there, and it was late at night. In fact, it was at the warehouse in Edina, and it was just Susan and myself. I came in, and I hadn't written anything, because I hadn't heard the song. Just came in and did an extemporaneous thing on it. Leeds recorded his sax lines, and Susan mixed the track so Prince could listen to the results. Prince apparently enjoyed some of the elements of the track, but wanted to make some changes. And the book also says the version from this date, meaning August 10th, 1985, was not released in Prince's lifetime. And that's because there was additional work on it, and my understanding is, of course, the additional work done on Sexual Suicide is what ended up on Crystal Ball. Prince was not entirely satisfied with the results of Sexual Suicide, so he had Susan reach out to Eric asking him to come back in to help find a better way. There were parts of it that he really liked, and he wanted the rest of it to kind of be like this one part that I did, recalled Leeds. So I said, okay, that's cool. For whatever reason, I came up with some little device where I stacked the horns, and I had like 5 or 6 horns stacked, and I was using some non-chordal tones in there, and I had no relationship to the chord structure or the key signature of the song at all. I was trying to give it more of a vocal quality so that you heard the horns not so much as a melody, but almost as if it was talking. I think a saxophone, particularly a tenor, almost more than any of the wind instruments, is the one that is closest to a human voice. Susan put a harmonizer on the baritone to really whack it out, so that's what I did. And then I put on another little thing. It was wall-to-wall stuff. He just got thrilled with it. He thought it was the greatest thing in the world he'd ever heard. Of course, the song didn't come out until like 10 years later. Leeds would use the harmonic device that he used in the song on some of his later work, including the title track to his Times Squared album in 1991. There are a lot of entries for sexual suicide in this book. I'm not going to read all of them, just little tidbits here and there that I think are interesting. So from an entry from November 15th, 1985, Wendy had this to say about the song. Prince played Sexual Suicide for Wendy and asked for her help on the track. I love Sexual Suicide. It's one of my all-time favorites. I did not play on that, but he asked me to go in and double his vocal, and he had me singing it in a mobile truck. Although it is unclear if Wendy's vocals were recorded on this date and in this particular mobile truck, he was insistent that she add her voice during one of the sessions. I remember singing it and being like, oh, this is something. I was like, that's incredible. You've got to put that one out. And he was like, no. I don't know why he didn't release that. He just didn't think it was right, I guess. I don't know. Too funky? Sometimes I thought he held back things that were so funky. Sometimes he felt that way. I'm like, why isn't that out there? Dream Factory was another one. And according to the book, again, on April 22nd, 1986, there was, it appears to be a Dream Factory track listing. So side 1 would have been Visions, Dream Factory, Wonderful Day, The Ballad of Dorothy Parker, Big Tall Wall, and That Says What? Side 2 would be Strange Relationship, Teacher Teacher, Starfish and Coffee, A Place in Heaven, and ending side 2 and ending the Dream Factory album with Sexual Suicide. Interesting. And then in June of 1986, when apparently Dream Factory was being looked at as more of a double album, it had Sexual Suicide ending side 2. So basically ending the first, what would be if it was a compact disc, ending the first disc. This includes other songs like All My Dreams, which would have ended the album, Crystal Ball, Power Fantastic, In a Large Room with No Light, Witness for the Prosecution. So, a lot of songs that ended up on the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe Edition, which was released, I believe, in 2020. Sexual Suicide, of course, was not a part of that because it was already released on Crystal Ball. So unless they had a basic tracking of that song from 85 that was interesting and unique enough to warrant including on that collection, they kind of already took that thunder away from that Super Deluxe by releasing it officially in 1998. So that is what I have to say about Sexual Suicide. Hope you enjoyed the show. I am been your host, Jason Brenninger. This is the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, and you can find the show at pressrewind.net on social media. And until next time, thank you very much, and goodbye.